Okay, there's an ongoing pissing war between people who use graphics cards. Radeon card users say that Radeon is better than NVIDIA, and NVIDIA card users say that NVIDIA is better than Radeon. Now, like anything, when you're in love with it, or it's what you use, or whatever, you will go to no end to defend and justify why yours is better and the other's is no good. Now, in the case of people using Radeon and NVIDIA cards, both sides are only using opinionated statements that they're trying to say are fact, thinking they're fact, to back up their side of the argument, but when in reality, neither side is actually using any real statistical, backed up, proven data that backs up their side of the argument. And or they are using irrelevant points and data to try to say, see, I told you. I'll get to what I mean by that in a minute, but I first want to state clearly that I am not stating in this video, and this video was not designed to say Radeon is better than NVIDIA or NVIDIA is better than Radeon. That's not what the purpose of this video is. The purpose of this video is to simply provide statistical backed up facts with a comparison that'll put the whole thing into clear view so people can actually see what's going on. Now, back to what I was saying about irrelevant data. What I'm talking about are benchmarks. Trying to use benchmarks to say this card is better than the other is completely pointless, because I can set a computer up and get 15 different benchmarks from the same computer depending on how I tweak the computer, the operating system, what programs I have running in the background, how I put the operating system on the computer. Is it 32-bit operating system? Is it 64-bit system? What am I running in the background? What tool am I using to use the benchmark? How am I getting the benchmark? Am I using fraps? You get the idea. There's too many variables. And on the flip side of that, I can, taking frames per second only, let's say I get, as an example, 30 frames per second in GTA 4 on a high-end system. I can also get 30 frames per second on a low-end system depending on how I tweak the game and the system. Now again, it doesn't matter whether the high-end system can play GTA higher. That isn't the point. The point is that I benchmark GTA 4 on a high-end system and got 30 frames per second, and I benchmarked GTA 4 on a low-end system and still got 30 frames per second. I can use both of them to say, see? But that's not the point. You can't use benchmarks to determine how good something is because it's not relevant data, because there's too many variables involved. And that is why benchmarks are pointless. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to be using a comparison here, very visual, very easy to understand. And that is a car with 4 tires on it and a car with 3 tires and a donut. And I'll be using that in conjunction with the physics engine in the game. Now, I'll clear up this whole thing so it makes sense, because some of you might go, what the hell are you talking about? Alright, it's very simple. A game that has a physics engine in it, I've seen people that use Radeon totally downplay physics. And I'm not saying physics is necessary in a game. I'm stating what physics does. Go to the wiki and look, Google wiki physics or whatever it is. Get to the wiki that has the physics, and it'll explain to you what it does. Physics in a game make the game run better. It's smoother. It's more realistic. It adds different gravity. There are different factors that they use. Physics engines, games that have a physics engine, that engine is part of the game. It's what makes the game run. I'm not saying that the game can't run without it, but when you're using the physics engine in a game that has a physics engine, the game is running functionally, perfectly functional, the way it's supposed to be run, because you're utilizing all the parts to it. Now, the only cards that can use that are NVIDIA. NVIDIA trademarked physics, period. Now, if you were using all the parts in a game's engine, and that includes the physics, you are using the game at full potential. It's again what I said earlier. Now, unless you were using an NVIDIA card, you can't, or I should say a card that has an NVIDIA chipset in it, you will never be able to use the physics aspect of it. It doesn't matter whether you have a workaround or not, which is where ATI comes into what I'm talking about. ATI cards, aka Radeon, will never, ever, ever, ever right to this point, be able to use the physics engine in a game. I don't care if there's catalyst drivers. I don't care if people say, oh, there's various equivalents of the drivers. If you do not have an NVIDIA card, you cannot take advantage of the physics engine in the game. Period. It's like trying to use DirectX 10 on Windows XP. You can't ever do it because, sure, there's a hack, but it's not the same thing. You are not utilizing DirectX 10 on XP. It's just not possible at this point. Maybe sometime down the future, but right now, impossible. Can't be done. And you may be using a workaround, but it's not the same thing as actually using it. Okay, now, taking that into account, I'm going to give you the visual with the car here and what's going on. When you have a car with 4 tires on it, we'll just say the car and 4 tires. Doesn't matter what parts are in the car. The car and 4 tires, it's running perfect because it's utilizing, the car is utilizing all the parts on it because that's what it has. It can function properly because it has all the parts. Now, you remove one of the tires and you put a donut on. Now the car is not functioning the way it normally could be. It's not that the car is not functioning. It's not functioning at its fullest because you're missing a piece that it can't use or you don't have. So, if you put a donut on a car, that car's not running the way it normally could. Sure, it may run fine, but it's not running perfectly because you're not utilizing the tire. And that's what I'm getting at with the ATI. The ATI is like putting a donut. The ATI and using an ATI card in a game that has a physics engine is like running a car with a donut on it. It doesn't. You can run it, and you may get good graphics, but you are not going to be able to run the game at performance level at it should be because you can't access the physics engine with an ATI card. You take an NVIDIA card, and you can utilize the game's full potential. Now, the Radeon card may outpower the NVIDIA card. The NVIDIA card can do something the ATI can't, and that makes certain games that have a physics engine built into them run better because of that reason. And anybody that has ATI can try to argue that point all you want, but if you are not using all the components in the game, you are not making the game function the way it could be. It doesn't matter whether it's a small section of it or how small. Irrelevant. The bottom line is, if you are going to run a game at perfect performance, you have to utilize every single part in the game regardless of how small. Again, it's like the donut on the car tire. It's like the donut on the car. Put a donut on the car, it's not going to function right. You put a tire on the car, it's going to function right. The NVIDIA card is like the tire. The ATI card is like the donut. That's the comparison. Those are base facts. You can't argue with those. Now again, the game may function fine. Good for you. If that's your preference, use it. But if you want perfectly functioning games, if you have a game that runs, that has a physics engine built into it, and you want to play the game flawlessly and perfectly the way it should be played, you need an NVIDIA card to do it. Period. Hopefully this clears everything up. Have a nice day.